Hello, good evening, my name is Joseph Filmography, and my Joy-Cons have finally started to drift. For those of you who don't know, Joy-Con drift is a very common issue with Nintendo Switch consoles because these things are cheaply made, but everyone keeps buying them anyways, so Nintendo really has no incentive to change them. Now, I knew the issue was gonna come eventually, but it still feels too soon. I just got my Switch a little over a year ago, and granted my Joy-Cons have lasted a lot longer than Duncan's did. His only lasted like 4 months before one of them started drifting. But alas, it's a bit of a problem, because the thing about Switch controllers is they are expensive. Joy-Cons, new Joy-Cons, that's gonna be like 60 bucks. A Pro controller is gonna be around 60 bucks. Your best bet is to go with one of the plug controllers that you have to have plugged into the Switch in order to play, and it doesn't have any motion controls, because those are just a little over 20. Now, seeing as this thing has started to drift and is no longer reliable as a controller, yes, I can send these back to Nintendo and get a replacement pair, but I want to be able to play my Switch in the meantime. So yesterday, I went over to GameStop to buy a new plug controller, and they had a used controller in really good condition, so I ended up coming out with one of the wireless controllers, one of the fancy controllers that doesn't need to be plugged into the Switch and still has gyro. I was absolutely not intending to use that controller, but that's what I ended up with because I got it at a pretty good price. It was just like 40 bucks as opposed to 60, so I'll take a third off, that's not bad. And as soon as I got this controller, my mind immediately went to think about Neryl's most recent video on setting up gyro aim with controllers. For those of you who have not seen that video, and I'll probably link it here, he spends a lot of time talking about how gyro aim is actually beneficial for gaming as an industry, and how if used properly, it can really enhance certain games. And I really enjoyed that video, but I didn't have a controller with gyro aim because I play with Xbox controllers. So I enjoyed the video, but it was more just an enjoyment thing and less of an actual, hey, I might use this thing. But once I got this, an idea popped into my head. Because playing Zelda games, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Breath of the Wild, all three of those games have gyro aim when you're using the bow. And that is insanely helpful in actually helping you hit your target, because instead of having to move your stick around to actually hit your target, you can just do that. You can make much subtler movements with gyro aim, and be just as effective, if not more effective. And I dumped Majora's Mask to Citra, and playing it on that is pretty good, for sure, but not having gyro aim is a huge setback for the game. Because granted, you don't use it a ton, but it's very helpful when it comes in. And that was kind of the point of Neryl's video, is if gyro aim is used not just as a gimmick, but to actually assist and aid in gameplay, making it a better experience, that's good gyro aim. Now, he uses a lot of shooters for his example demonstration in the video. Resident Evil, Metal Gear Solid 5, I can't think of any of the others, I don't remember what they are, but he uses shooter games. And while I do have Metal Gear Solid 5, I don't plan on playing it until I've actually beaten 2 and 3 and Rising, come to think of it. The main point is the only shooter game I play is Halo. But the prospect of gyro aim was very interesting to me. So last night, I decided to sit down with my fancy new gyro controller and see if I could get gyro aim working in Halo. This is basically how that went. Right off the bat, the Pro Controller actually plays Halo very well. I'd initially thought the digital triggers rather than mechanical triggers would be a problem, but with Halo, it doesn't really come into effect. So the first thing I did is I popped into the academy, popped onto the map Streets, and just started a training round. There's my little guy! So, here you can see the default controls of Halo on a controller. Controller is absolutely my preferred way to play really any game except Minecraft and Terraria, and Halo is no exception to that. I feel a lot better with a controller in my hands than with my fingers awkwardly situated over a mouse and keyboard. Stop that. Thank you. So I think you can see against these regular difficulty bots, I'm pretty decent with a regular controller. Now zooming in Halo Infinite is interesting because it doesn't, to my knowledge, actually help you in any way. It doesn't really give you a damage buff, it doesn't make your shots more accurate. It's just a tool to help you actually see better. But how interesting would it be if there was a way to make really small and quick movements with your controller while aiming so you can better hit other Spartans? That is the question I ran into last night, and the results were interesting. Very, very interesting. After a lot of tweaking settings, the finished product I ended up with is a system where only when I zoom in does it go into gyro aim. Now you can clearly see gyro aim in Halo is, well, it's an experience, alright. Honestly, this is a pretty good system so far, because you don't have to zoom in, it's just if you want to, if you feel it'll give you a little edge. It was like 2 feet away and I had a shotgun and I couldn't hit him. Now you can probably see here that gyro aiming in Halo is a very, very scuffed process, but I feel like with enough trial and error, you could get a pretty good system going here. Maybe. So let's take a look at the process and how I actually got to this system that I have now. When you go to Steam, you can change your controller settings to use different inputs, and from those inputs, if you go to a specific game, such as, I don't know, Halo, you can actually go to the settings and you can change each individual input in your controller, which is really cool. Now the process to actually get gyro aim working properly in Halo was very difficult. But after enough time, I got something that works decently well enough. What Neryl said to do in his video was to start off by having a default play method and an aiming play method. And essentially what you do is for the aiming, you make the gyro your mouse, and for your default, you make whatever your aim button is swap you to the aiming configuration. And then of course you press the aim button again to swap back. Now, this is a pretty good system overall, however, this is not a horrible system overall. However, here's the problem you run into in Halo. The effect I'm trying to achieve here is that when I press left trigger to zoom in, it goes into gyro aim. And the moment I stop zooming in, the moment I go back to regular, the gyro is cancelled. That's the effect I would like to achieve. However, as you can see here, with the default layout from the tutorial, that doesn't work at all. But instead, you don't zoom in, and left trigger just locks you into gyro aim. So where's this problem coming from, and how do we fix it? Well, lucky for us, it's not actually super complicated. You see, it's simpler than you may think. When you're looking at an Xbox controller such as this one, you can see the triggers here are dynamic, and what I mean by that is you can push it all the way down, or you can push it just halfway. And for some games, the amount of push you have on the trigger gives different values. I can't personally think of any examples, but I guess one that I could imagine would be maybe pushing down a little bit is to fire once, and pushing down all the way is rapid fire in a shooter game. That's just an example, but I think you get the idea. Here's one. In Super Mario Sunshine, your flood is controlled by one of the triggers. I don't remember which one, but it's one of them. And depending on how hard you're pushing and how consistently you're pushing, it changes the way you shoot. So in 3D All-Stars, using a Switch controller that had digital triggers, that functionality was essentially lost as far as I understand. Now, as you can see here, the Switch controller does not have dynamic triggers in the way the Xbox controller did, but rather digital triggers that are either all the way pressed or all the way unpressed, and there is no in between. This usually wouldn't be that big of a deal, but for some games, it actually is. Now the problem we're running into here is that in Halo, my zoom is my left trigger. So if I want to switch to a different action set with my left trigger, I need to have it not only set to zoom, but also change to the aiming action set. And then once you go to the aiming action set, your left trigger is going to not only de-zoom yourself, but change back to default. Here's the problem. I have a full pull set as the regular zoom and a soft pull set change action set. But on the Switch controller, where it only has one input for the trigger, there is no full or soft pull. It's just a trigger pull. Everything is by default both. The problem we're running into now is my left trigger, when I pull it, it's by default switching to the aiming action set where I have gyro aim. However, by switching to this new action set, it's canceling the trigger hold, meaning my zoom is lost. So I have gyro aim, but I can't zoom in. And with a pistol, sure, that's not too bad. But if I were to get a sniper rifle or something, for example, here's a battle rifle. A battle rifle is a weapon with a pretty big scope, a pretty long scope. However, when I'm using it with this configuration, I can't zoom in at all, which is a slight problem for a precision weapon, especially one like the shock rifle. I'm holding left trigger right now. I just can't zoom in. Sniping is not easy if you can't actually use the scope on your sniper rifle. Another thing I neglected to discuss, if you want to have gyro aim that feels good, you have to set it as a mouse. You now have to bind each of these buttons to a keyboard button to work with the mouse. However, you can set it to be mouse joystick, and that means it'll just be controller inputs. However, once you zoom with mouse joystick, nothing has changed. That's not what I expected. See, I'm moving my controller back and forth quickly right now, but you can see since it's set to a joystick, it suffers from the same dead zones that a joystick would suffer from. And where I would be getting fluid, continuous motion with a mouse, I'm getting instead this jaggedy motion. And my controller is actually turned backwards right now because the motion is so unfluid and I'm trying to face the doorway. There we are. You can see here it's very hard to aim with the mouse joystick. You're essentially getting the worst of both worlds. So that eliminates mouse joystick as an option. How about we try joystick camera? Since all we want to do is turn the camera, joystick camera should ideally be an excellent setting for us, so that we can simply move our camera around and nothing else is affected at all, right? Well, as you may imagine, this doesn't work too well. In fact, joystick camera now moves your guy with the gyro aim. You can see here, I'm moving my controller to move my character around, and I'm moving it in a very awkward way. To move forward, you now have to move your controller back, and left and right are seemingly inverted. Now, I don't know about you, but this seems like optimal gaming to me. So that's our joystick camera option eliminated. How about joystick move? Maybe since the camera was the inverse and moved our character, joystick move will actually... Nope, that's still moving my guy around. The entire point of this was to improve my gaming, not to make it substantially worse. Though honestly, I feel like if you had a custom lobby of a bunch of dudes doing nothing but this, like 8 guys all playing with gyro move, that could be a very, very amusing game. But you're not going to get very far in online. So what I eventually settled on was having my gyro aim set to mouse. But that doesn't help our aiming situation. For whatever reason, I still can't actually aim with my triggers. Now I've tweaked my settings a little bit to give myself something... Oh. Now that's not right. What I now have is I press left trigger once to activate gyro aim, and I press it again to activate my zoom, and it alternates between them. I'm not pressing anything right now. I'm legitimately not touching the controller. What is happening? I sure am glad I just shot every round out of my gun. Apparently. Stop! Stop! No! In case you couldn't already guess, gyro aim in a game that is not meant for gyro aim is not very good. However, in the end, I did end up with a half-decent configuration. What I ended up doing in the end was ditching the aiming action set altogether, but rather I set my gyro to mouse on my default action set. I set the gyro to only be enabled when the left trigger is being pulled, and the moment I stop pulling the left trigger, the gyro stops. What I ended up with is actually a pretty cool effect where I can run around the world freely as I normally would in Halo. It's pretty much the default Halo experience. But now, when I zoom in, not only does the camera zoom, but it goes into gyro mode. This is, I believe, the definitive way to play Halo if you have to play with gyro aim. I don't know why you would play Halo with gyro aim, and I'm pretty sure I'm the first person who's ever thought of this. For good reason. It's dumb. I had initially thought gyro aim in Halo would be incredibly helpful with how helpful it was for me in the Zelda games. However, there's one major thing I didn't take into account, and that's the way gyro aiming is used in Zelda. You see, in all of the Zelda games I play with gyro aim, when you're actually aiming with the gyro, you're completely still. Or, at least in Breath of the Wild, very, very slow. Halo is a game where if you want to win, you have to be constantly aware of your surroundings. You have to be able to keep track of your enemies and stay one step ahead of them. The entire idea with Halo is even starts. Every player starts with the same gear and whatnot. You pick up power-ups along the map. But if you're very much limited by gyro aim, you're now literally putting yourself at a disadvantage because all of the other players have a more consistent aiming method than you do. Don't get me wrong, gyro is a cool novelty and all, but it just doesn't work while you're moving. I think I should mention the fact that when you look at my training options, I am playing against marine bots. These aren't even hard bots, and they are messing me up with my gyro aim. As long as I'm moving in a straight line and the enemy is not shooting back, gyro is honestly very effective. And if you have an opportunity to sit still and not move that much, yeah, I can see how this would be very helpful if I'm being honest. So that's gyro aim in Halo. It's, well, it's an experience, alright. I don't know if a good experience is quite the term I'd use, but who knows, maybe in time I'll actually get used to it. Halo's the only shooter I really play, so I can't think of anything else to add gyro to. Oh, I just got a terrible idea.